Bryce Canyon National Park on NP₃. Hi there, and welcome to the National Parks Photography Program. And today we're going to be talking about Bryce Canyon National Park. Now, Bryce Canyon is one of the 5 national parks of southern Utah. So going from east to west, we have Arches Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, Bryce Canyon, and Zion. And Bryce is also the top of what's called the Grand Staircase. So if we think about the Grand Canyon, Zion Canyon, and Bryce Canyon, obviously each one steps up from the bottom of the canyon to the top. But beyond that, the top of Grand Canyon's north rim, in terms of geologic layers, the top of the Grand Canyon's north rim is the bottom layer of Zion Canyon. The top of Zion Canyon is the bottom of Bryce, and then on up to the top of Bryce Canyon. Additionally, Bryce Canyon is a little bit of a misnomer in that it isn't actually a canyon. It's kind of an amphitheater where, from the rim, you're facing east and there's no other side. It's just open to the east. And so it's this amphitheater carved out, as through freeze-thaw cycles and erosion, the rock keeps wearing back towards the west. And where you get sort of a hard cap in the rock that protects some of the rock below it from erosion, you'll get these spires, which are called hoodoos. And the hoodoos are what Bryce Canyon is famous for and what you really go there to see and to photograph. Now, being that Bryce Canyon is open, faces towards the east, it does have some implications for photography there. And so what it makes for is a better dawn site to photograph than a dusk site. Now, you can do sunset photos there, but you're not going to get a photo very easily anyway. Well, I guess if you had a helicopter or something, you could do it, but you're not normally going to get a photo of the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater with all the hoodoos and then the sun setting behind it. It doesn't really set up that way. So if you wait and you're patient and you find the right angles, you can find some interesting light on the hoodoos at sunset or near sunset. You can get the eastern sky. The sky opposite sunrise and sunset is also often very interesting, with sort of pastel colors, pinks and purples. And so you can do some really nice photographs, but most of the best photography that you see from Bryce is done at dawn. If you're going to Bryce, that's really what you're going to see is the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater. That's the iconic spot. There's great stuff in the park north of that, including Fairyland Point, and then there's some really interesting stuff as the park road continues south of the amphitheater. But the meat of the park that people come to see is the Bryce Amphitheater. And there's 4 major viewpoints that you can choose from. So you have Sunrise Point and Sunset Point, which is kind of, I don't know why they've named them that, because they're right next to each other and they both face east, but that's what they're called. So Sunrise Point and Sunset Point, then Inspiration Point, and finally Bryce Point. And Bryce Point actually is where the amphitheater starts to curl out at the southern end and head east. So it is a spot where you can get some angles looking a little bit back towards sort of the northwest into the amphitheater, but nothing really true west or southwest even for a sunset shot. Thinking about shooting at Bryce during sunrise, hopefully you've gotten there the day before and have had some time, or if you haven't gotten there the day before, if you're just driving in and getting there for sunrise, do some research and look at images online. You can Google image search any of these points and kind of get a feel for what they look like. But you really want to know before you go there what not just your favorite overlook is, but specifically your favorite view at that overlook and how you want to compose sort of your primary goal shot at Bryce before the sunrise. And the reason is I found that at these desert parks, especially these ones with the reddish rock like this, that there really is a difference between sort of the very moment of sunrise and even 5 or 10 minutes later. There's still good light. I mean, there still is a golden hour. There's still good light for some time. But everything is just sort of softer and redder and more vibrant, and right at that moment when the sun is on the horizon. And so you don't want to be experimenting. I mean, it's a very short window. And so you don't want to be experimenting with different things during that time. If your favorite shot is directly into the sunrise, that's fine. And if your favorite shot is, looking more north, kind of at a 90-degree angle to the sunlight and across the amphitheater in one way or the other, that's fine too. You just want to have that sort of thought out so that you can take the most advantage of that very first minute of light. I think that's more true at a place like Bryce than it is at, somewhere like maybe Glacier with, mountains and trees. And I mean, there is a difference there, but I've just never noticed that the intensity of the light coming off the landscape gets impacted as much at sort of that site, like a glacier type site, as it is at a Bryce type site. So I think you really do want to think ahead about what your primary shot's going to be. If you're shooting straight into the sunrise, of course, that's good to know HDR photography or some high dynamic range photography tips, because the hoodoos are going to be sticking up, but you're going to be looking at the shadow sides of them. So it's a view I really like. My favorite shot of my own from Bryce was from Inspiration Point, looking right into the sunrise. And I think it's a span of like 7 or 8 stops to get some detail, get good detail and exposure for down in the canyon, and then still maintain good exposure for the area of the sky right where the sun is. So that is something, if you're familiar with HDR, if you're looking to shoot that kind of a shot, get yourself familiar with HDR. If you're shooting, at an angle, not straight into the sun, maybe just a graduated neutral density filter might help balance the sky out enough. You can get pretty close to doing that on one exposure. Planning even further ahead then, my preference at Bryce is, again, have that first shot along the rim that you're going to get right at sunrise. But then starting from Sunset Point that's one of the ends for the Queen's Garden Navajo Loop Trail. And if you look back, I did a video on my top national parks hikes, and Bryce Canyon is right near the top. They say Queen's Garden Navajo Loop is the best 3-mile hike in America, and it might be the best 3-mile hike in the world. For if something's better than that, I don't know how, because it is absolutely truly amazing hike. And I think it's best done, especially for photographers, counterclockwise, starting at Sunset Point, going down Navajo Loop into the canyon, connecting with Queen's Garden. You'll come back up at Sunrise Point, and then follow the rim trail back to where you started. The reason for that is a lot of the sort of most famous features at Bryce Canyon, so things like Thor's Hammer, which is kind of the most famous hoodoo, and you'll have seen it. If you don't know what Thor's Hammer is, look for an image of it. You'll recognize it. And that is right near the trailhead for leaving from Sunset Point. And so by starting there shortly after sunrise and getting down into the trail, you're still in that first hour of golden light to shoot right away. It's now you may find, if you have some experience with it, you may find that your favorite shot or one you want to experiment with is right in that area by Sunset Point. So next time I go to Bryce, that's going to probably be my plan. I've done the rim at sunrise, so probably I'll get to Sunset Point before sunrise and try to get down into the canyon. I'll look back through my images and find, what's one that could really be enhanced by that extra bit of golden light. But if you haven't been to Bryce before, and if you're watching this video for tips, I think that's certainly a possibility. pick your favorite rim point, shoot until 5 minutes after sunrise, and then get to sunset point. None of these things are very far apart, so it's not like you're going to spend half an hour traveling in the car and missing out. I shot from Inspiration Point and then just scooted over to Sunset Point, and I mean, what is it, maybe 5 minutes drive? It's not very far. And then even aside from the photography aspect, there's no better way to experience Bryce Canyon than getting down into the canyon, and the best way to do that is Queen's Garden Navajo Loop. And then the last thing to think about when you're going to Bryce is what time of year you're going. Bryce being really high, and again, I mean, I think we're talking like 8,000 feet at the rim. And so it's cool, cooler than, a low desert would be. And so you have a little longer window for winter, but winter is just, I think, the most spectacular time to visit Bryce. My favorite images that I've seen from Bryce tend to be during the winter. And it's just because of that contrast between the snow and the red rocks. I think it makes the rocks look even more bold and even more red and colorful. So, if you have the ability to get there during the winter, I'd really recommend it. It's going to be beautiful and amazing anytime, but during the winter, it'll be even better. Two things you want to think about then, going to Bryce, aside from photography, once you've planned out the time of year and all that stuff, is first of all, if you're going there during the winter, I mean, it does snow, the trails get covered in snow and that gets packed down, it gets icy. So you're really going to want to have some, Yaks tracks or some kind of traction device for your shoes or your boots before you arrive at Bryce. And they do sell things in the visitor center if you don't have them there. But it's kind of a necessity. It can be really slick, and you're dealing with elevation changes and things like this. So, making sure that you're prepared with good traction is very important. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, you're talking elevations like 8,000 feet. So, Queen's Garden Navajo Loop is only about 3 miles, so it's not overly strenuous distance-wise, but it's pretty significant elevation changes. And, at 8,000 feet, just getting enough oxygen becomes an issue, and especially if you haven't had time to acclimate to altitude at all. Be aware what you're getting into, but it's not too strenuous that you shouldn't even consider it or anything like that. So that's kind of my overview for Bryce. Again, study your viewpoints, know where you want to be at sunrise. Sunrise is better than sunset. Shoot that shot. And then Queen's Garden Navajo Loop counterclockwise, I think, is the best way to go. And it's a park that you can really do pretty good justice to in a day. Obviously, you could spend a lifetime at any of these places and still find new things and new angles. But unlike, Yellowstone, you can't even hope to see it in a week. It's just so much to see. Bryce is one where, if you're traveling through the area and all you have is one day to give it, I think you can really get a good feel for it and do it justice. Probably 3 days would be, a really sort of ideal amount of time to get some different views and explore it a little more in depth. But, it's not one of these huge, massive, intimidating parks in terms of its scale. It's a very accessible park, and it's a very beautiful park, of course. So if you have been to Bryce and you think I'm missing anything or have any additions to the tips I've given, feel free to leave those in the comments below. Or if you haven't been and you have any questions for me, leave those in the comments and I'll do my best to answer those. If this has been useful for you, and give it a thumbs up. That always helps me know that people like what they see and they want to see more of this content. And even better yet, subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss overviews of other national parks that I have coming up in the future, or other national parks and photography topics. Otherwise, that's all I have on Bryce for now. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.